Macclesfield 2, Crystal Palace 1. John, you are Macclesfield. We have talked to you about it when they went out of business. What joy.
Yes. Unbridled joy, really. Just, I suppose, bursting with civic pride. I wasn't there. I wish I could have been there, but I'm more than happy for everybody that was there. It was just an utterly golden moment. And as you said, I mean, I was thinking back this morning about when you called me from the show back when Mac was extinct. Macclesfield Town FC was out of business, and the desolation I felt that day, because I haven't lived in Macclesfield for 25 years or so, 26 years nearly. And it's the club always provided that taste of home. I would see them when they played down south. And that connection was gone. I mean, I still go to Macclesfield an awful lot, but to see them back and to see the work that Rob Smethurst, the owner, and those around him have done, and just the happiness on faces. And I've been asked to do a couple of radio spots and writing, and the thing is, wonderful enough, a guy on 5 Live said to me, "Well, you don't seem that happy about this." And the other guy that was on there was also of a similar man. And basically, because we're from Mac, that's just not the way. It's an unassuming place. It's just sort of, yeah, it's good, yeah, great, yeah, but it's brilliant. But it's not a place to completely lose it and to get...
In the production meeting debrief, they'll be like, never get that miserable Mac fan on again. Well, we wanted someone bouncing off the walls. This is the happiest I've ever heard you, John.
Well, yeah, this is it, you see. I mean, it obviously wasn't familiar with my work, but it's just... I mean, Macclesfield as a club, and Sam has spent quite a bit of time now, has always struggled because it's in one of the greatest catchment areas for football in the world. I think we can say that. United and City are just up the road. You've got Stoke City, we're a Premier League club. That's only 15, 16 miles away. And Everton and Liverpool are not far away either. And Mac had a proud non-league history, had to fight for its own identity, and now enters history. As this new club, as this Phoenix club, with this brilliant victory, with, you mentioned the goal scorer, Dawson. I mean, he set it off from the very start, didn't he? Bleeding like Terry Butcher from the, just it's just a clash of heads of which he soldiered on as if unaffected, and just. I think Palace were surprised by how sunny it gets in Macclesfield. I think that was part of it. They were surprised by the 4G pitch, and they were beaten by, it has to be said, the better team. And I mean, we could go over Palace, but you know that I'm a big Adam Wharton fan. Yeah. But I'm not sure I'd have him in a 6-a-side on a 4G. The surface just didn't seem to suit him, did it? But Matt were brilliant, and the work they've done and the remembrance of Ethan McLeod, there wasn't a hair out of place with what they did. Credit to Rob Smethurst, credit to everybody at the club. It's good to be Mac.
Yeah. And Barry, like it is like statistically the biggest ever FA Cup upset. And it's quite hard, I think, we've sort of talked about this before and other things, to sort of realise you're witnessing history, like to put this with Ronnie Radford and Sutton United and all those. But that is 117 league places between these sides. Palace, the holders of the FA Cup. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and by a strange quirk, the last time the holders were knocked out by a non-league side was 117 years ago, and the holders in question were Wolves, and the side that knocked them out were Palace. So it's just one of those little coincidences football throws up. I have actually seen people on social media try to denigrate Macclesfield's achievement by pointing out that, Crystal Palace didn't field a full-strength side, so it doesn't count as a proper joint killing. You'd have to have a heart made out of coal or flint to think that, and to try and in any way disparage an absolutely monumental achievement. I love the FA Cup. I love FA Cup shocks. I can remember all the biggies, and this is right up there, and probably, as you say, statistically, literally the biggest. There has never been a bigger gap, and Palace were the holders. I'm so pleased for John Rooney as well, because I was quite moved when I read last week that when Ethan McLeod tragically lost his life a few weeks ago, Rooney made the decision to ring each member of his squad individually and tell them this terrible news. That cannot have been an easy thing to do, and it's something he didn't have to do. So that a huge tip of the hat to him for that. And being John Rooney must be difficult, because you're Wayne Rooney's brother, and all anyone ever wants to talk to you about is Wayne Rooney, and you weren't as good as football as your brother. And for him to have this moment, where his moment in the sun that will forever be remembered, I think is lovely as well. So hats off to Macclesfield. I thought it was just a great story.
Yeah, and actually, like, it was really lovely seeing how emotional Wayne Rooney was, not to make it about him, and how proud of his brother he was. And it's always, Sam, injury time and the final whistle and just the moment when the fans know, right? And like, there was a couple when they were like, okay, this is it. I think Wharton banged one over the bar, and you're like, this is it. And then the ref played on, and then it ended up with Dawson just anywhere. And then the full-time whistle goes, and just that is such an amazing moment.
Yeah, and all the stewards saying, "Oh, like, please stay off the pitch, no pitch invasions," and yet the owner is the first one on there. So, like, what are you going to do if your owner's on the pitch? There's just, as John said, I spent a lot of time around Macclesfield. I was up there on Thursday, actually, with them training. For all those who denigrate the achievement, people forget Mac were missing poor Danny Elliott, their top scorer in the competition. He got a hat-trick earlier in the round. I felt for him. I think he knew he was never going to play, but had to do all the pre-match media stuff because they didn't want Palace to have too much of an insight into their team selection. I mean, that club, it's just the heartbeat of the community again. Like, if you go down to the ground, they've done it up beautifully. There's a huge bar that's used for functions all the time. There's a gym there. There's people every day. John Rooney is, like, I spoke to him on Thursday, and he was just so proud about being able to stand on the touchline, because he started his career at the old Macclesfield Town. One of his first games, he came on in the 90th minute of the FA Cup third round game against Everton back in a long time ago. He finished his playing career
2009, Sam.
2009 was it? And he got promoted.
I was there
with Matt last year. Were you? And he's got Francis Jeffers as well as his assistant, who brings a lot of humour, likes to sit in the background, didn't really want to speak because he said, no, this is all about John, who has got the most beautiful white smile, by the way. Those teeth, I've never seen a whiter set of gnashes than John Rooney's. But yeah, so he finished, and he wasn't, Robbie Savage left last minute. John Rooney was in the gym on a Sunday before going back to pre-season on Monday, preparing as a player, and by the Tuesday he was taking training. So I mean, it's just so full of stories. The Ethan McLeod tragedy, and the players, they were at an away game, and McLeod drove home, and the team coach was in a traffic jam, and they actually drove past the accident, unbeknownst to them at the time that Ethan was involved. So, like, just the character they've shown. Paul Dawson's a brilliant footballer. I tell you what, he's had a hell of a week. He scored the winner against Radcliffe Borough on his birthday on Tuesday. Go and look at that goal. It is an absolutely brilliant strike. And that was after he and his teammates had spent time shoveling snow off the pitch to get this game on. They paid for their own covers. They needed the pitch to get covers. So they ended up training alongside students at Manchester Met. It's just one of those proper non-league stories. It's brilliant for them.
Yeah, and John, also, like, we mentioned the Dawson goal, like the Buckley Ricketts, it took like 25 minutes to dribble in. How brilliant. It's one of those where we all know it's going in, but we're all waiting, just waiting and waiting.
Just an incredible piece of improvisation. He sort of almost redirected himself in the air, didn't he? And then it sort of bobbled in along the, picking up those little 4G pellets as it rolled in. Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned that a friend of mine that was at the game, Paul, sent me a video of those final minutes from in the crowd, and just listening to the anxiety of the people there is it is quite a moment. And there was a lot of self-policing going on, of people a couple of people sort of went a bit early and tried to get on the pitch. He's like, no, you get back off, and I've been at those games at Mac in the old days where they've won FA trophies, and it's one of those places where they're always going to go on the pitch, and and they did, and it was great to see Rob Smethurst leading the charge. I mean, on a 4G pitch, you're not going to spoil the pitch, are you? So why not get on there and celebrate and enjoy? And wow.
Tell us a bit about Rob Smethurst, John.
Yeah, Rob's a local lad, actually, a friend of my sister, knows the family quite well. He is a local, made his money in the motor trade, was a very successful business, and then decided on a whim to, when the club went down, the old club went down back in 2020, decided to buy the club off Rightmove. Now, the way that Rob tells it is that he was in the middle of a 4-day session. Sessions have been part of Rob's makeup until quite recently. I think he's forsworn that actually at the moment. So, or perhaps forever, hopefully forever. And he just decided to do it on a whim. He's good friends with Robbie Savage from, the kids going to the same school and all that, down in the sort of Cheshire Village community. And the first thing they did actually, and this was the thing that Rob and those around him, and he would give credit to many of those around him, and they deserve it, the unnamed people, is that 4G pitch restored the club to the community, because people could play on it, people could visit it. The bar that you mentioned, I watched Euro 2020 in there. The old club had lost touch with the town. It's on the edge of town. It's on the southern tip of the town. You might not, like Cambridge United's ground is a bit out of the town. It's sort of You'd miss it if you weren't going there, if you see what I mean. And what they've done is they've restored it to the town, and people are proud of that club again and go to that club and use it, and it's part of how the town works. And it had lost that, and in creating and thinking through the business of it, he's put £4 million of his own money in. He's created a success story. I know recently he's moved. There are other owners involved, and he said that he'd taken it as far as he can. But he was front and centre, deservedly so, on this, the greatest of all moments. And, whatever happens now, Macclesfield had this moment. And, I did want them to draw United in the next round, but that obviously relied on Manchester United actually winning a game, so that was not going to happen. But there's a line in a Mac Lads album, and excuse the language for 1 second, in which Mutley McLad, the singer, says, "Wait till you get Mac Town in 4th round. Play a fucking real team." There's a bit of Mac accent for you.
Let's talk about the schedule then. This was originally planned for the summer. To reduce scheduling conflicts with European clubs and competitions. It was changed to December to make room for the Club World Cup in the summer. Justification of this decision, it was made to avoid a clash with European leagues and their winter breaks, and avoid 2 final group games in the Champions League. I saw you tweeting, Osasu, about the cold and the rain, and how you hated how cold and rainy it was for Afcon. But how have you found it, or what have you made of the scheduling?
If you've been reading my tweets, then you know that I'm profoundly unhappy with the situation regarding the Afcon. The Afcon started in 1957. It's 68 or 69 years old. We have our own football heritage, our customs, our traditions, that it has so many good implications having this tournament every 2 years. It means, one, there is consistent competition in the continent for all the national teams. It means that football infrastructure has to be continually developed. And if you have this tournament every 4 years, all those things will die. In addition, I actually find it quite bizarre that Patrice Motsepe is trying to negotiate an 8-year, $1 billion deal for CAF, in which I understand IMG is the preferred bidder. But IMG or whoever is going to provide the $1 billion guarantee for 8 years will not be ready to pay $1 billion if you reduce the frequency of the tournament to every 4 years.
Yeah.
Because look, as all of you know, the UEFA Champions League is the cash cow of UEFA. No, the European Championship is just a minor addition, a minor financial addition, which brings some extra money, which is good. But the Champions League is the cash cow. For African football, the Afcon is the bread and butter of the financial ecosystem of CAF. So if you have it every 4 years, when you don't have an African Champions League that has the financial viability of a UEFA Champions League, that is going to be disastrous.
If it's the cash cow for CAF, why are CAF making it every 4 years?
Well, this is the million-dollar question we are all asking. Well, I know the answer to it, and Gianni Infantino is primarily responsible for this decision. As far back as February 2020, here in Morocco, he had a meeting with the then president of CAF, Ahmad, and his executive committee here in Morocco, in Rabat. And during that meeting, Gianni Infantino actually used some words which were quite disrespectful to African football, because he described the biennial Afcon as being useless and that it made sense for Africa to go 4 years. If Issa Hayatou had been president and he had said that, Issa Hayatou would have told Infantino to leave the meeting straight away, or he would have made him apologize for such a disrespectful remark. But they all kept quiet about it. So this has been Gianni Infantino's project for the last 5 years. He hasn't hidden it that he doesn't believe in a biannual or biennial AFCON. And so this is wholly his doing.
Motsepe's his guy, and so for that reason, Gianni has quite a lot of power in African football, if I'm not mistaken. And so could this possibly...
No, you're not mistaken. You're correct.
You know, could African football revolt against Motsepe and therefore against Gianni or not?
Possible. I mean, I was speaking to a sports minister about this decision over the weekend, and he told me that it's a nonsense. And one thing people need to appreciate is that the African Cup of Nations is not even a matter for CAF alone. This is a matter of African heritage. And this matter will be discussed by the Sports Commission of the African Union. It will be discussed by national governments. And they are going to make it quite clear to Motsepe that this is not a decision he can take alone. In actual fact, he took this decision, or he announced this decision without putting it through the proper statutory channels. First of all, you have to take it to the executive committee for them to discuss. And if the executive committee agree in principle, you have to table it before the General Assembly, which is the supreme body of CAF, to discuss. And then they have to approve it. But in CAF over the last 4 or 5 years, they deal with the law in breach rather than in compliance. And that's very unfortunate for African football.
Yeah, I mean, I'm entirely with Osasu there. I think, I mean, you know, the reason why I'm very sceptical there will be a significant backlash against this is that what Infantino has is he has access to lots of FIFA committees which are very well remunerated, and the people he appoints to those committees are likely to do what he would like them to do. And if the cost of that is African football, I'm not sure how many of those delegates are prepared to put the cause of African football above themselves. Hayatou, for all his faults, he was always adamant that African football had to fight for itself and look after itself, and that's why you have this biennial tournament. If it is in 28, 32, 36, I presume the plan is to have it in the European summer to avoid a clash with the European leagues, with the Champions League. But there are two immediate problems with that. So one is it will then run concurrently with the Euros and the Copa America, which will reduce visibility, which is not good for African football. I mean, people in Africa won't care about that. They'll watch the Cup of Nations, obviously. But one of the joys of this Cup of Nations is how many people you see from all over the world who come to this tournament. You know, it's a real showcase. Quite apart from the fact it is the great moneymaker for CAF, it is a great showcase for African football. You know, got the train down from Fez the other day. I would say half the people in my carriage were Europeans who come to watch the tournament, which is a great thing. I mean, yeah, the concerns of Europeans who want to watch it are very low on the list of priorities, but that exposure is useful. The other thing is, if you're having this June, July every year, can you ever host it again on the west side of the continent? And the answer to that is no, because that's when the rainy season is, which is why they had to move the one in Cote d'Ivoire, the one in Cameroon, the last two. So it's still going to have to be in January, February, or possibly this December, January date works. I don't know. I mean, maybe this is the solution with the Champions League moving. Maybe having it over the New Year period, maybe that does work. I know Osasu doesn't like the cold in North Africa at this time of year, but I don't particularly like the heat and humidity in West Africa at this time of year either. So yeah, that cuts both ways. But yeah, it just seems to me a decision that is bad for African football on all kinds of levels. It's good for UEFA and it's good for FIFA. And essentially this has been taken so that they can fit in the Club World Cup. I mean, that's why it's in this slot. They agree. Yeah. Ahmed said, yes, we will move it to the European summer so we don't cause disruption to the European club season. And having agreed to do that, what does FIFA do? It invents a new tournament in that slot, which means the Cup of Nations then has to scrabble around to find this little window over Christmas when players were released 5 days before the tournament. When it's
ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
The statutory period of time is 2 weeks, but it's only Africa. It doesn't matter. It's scandalous.
And actually, that's interesting about, as you're saying, African football has to fight for itself. I mean, if every sport has to do that, but and Africa is too big to answer the question, what is the state of football in Africa like? But because there is so much more football everywhere, the fact that it has to fight even hard, it will have to fight even harder, right?
Gianni Infantino he claims he loves African football so much, but his actions don't show that he loves it, because there was no need. What is the purpose? The only reason why they are expanding the Club World Cup is because FIFA wants to make more money and they want to be able to challenge UEFA financially. That's the only way they can. And that's why they are developing the tournament. As Jonathan pointed out, the agreement was that the Afcon will be in the summer. And that was why it was played in that slot in Egypt. And it was a good tournament. We all enjoyed it. But even at that, I still say that there is no recognition from FIFA that Africa has the most climatically diverse conditions in the world. Mm-hmm. You can't stage an Afcon in June and July all over Africa. You can't. You can do it in the north. If you try to do that in South Africa, that would be in the winter. And I was at the World Cup in 2010 in South Africa. It was so cold at night. When we tried to go out of the press room to go to the porter cabins where the toilets were, it was hell because it was that cold outside. So you can't have it in June and July in southern Africa. In the west of the continent, it's the rainy season. You don't want to be having it. Even if you get the pitches in good condition to deal with the rain, you have to think of the infrastructure around the tournament, access to the stadiums and leaving. It will be a nightmare. And so the real solution for the African Cup of Nations is to say, listen, if you're hosting it in sub-Saharan Africa, do it in January to March. If you are having it in North Africa, do it in June and July, and you play the games in the evenings because obviously in the middle of the day it's really hot. And if you have the organization to ensure you decide on these hosts 4 to 5 years in advance so that the FIFA calendar can be ordered to reflect these things, I don't see what the problem is. But if there's no will or if there's no respect from Infantino for the traditions and the heritage of African football, then of course he doesn't care. As Jonathan will remember, the Club World Cup started before the end of the Afcon in Cameroon. That was so disrespectful. What were you expecting Egypt to do with so many players playing for Ali, then thinking of, what are we going to do when we have to go and play for our club when the African Cup of Nations was yet to finish? So these are the kind of things that have been going on, which I find very, very annoying and really disrespectful.
It is unsurprising and yet incredibly frustrating, isn't it?
As we say in Latin, res ipsa loquitur, the facts speak for themselves.
Patrick Mosepe did say, historically Afcon was the prime resource for us. Now we'll get financial resources every year. This is with the launch of a new annual African Nations League. It's an exciting new structure which will contribute to sustainable financial independence and ensure more synchronization with the FIFA calendar. I think we have your live reaction to that, Osasu, there.
That's a joke. That's a complete and utter joke. Look, when they tried to launch the African Super League 2 years ago in Arusha, Tanzania, they told us that they would raise $200 million a year for 10 years. That's $2 billion. And we told them, if you can't get that from the African Cup of Nations, which is your blue ribbon tournament, how are you going to get that from a tournament you were just starting? Of course, we knew it was utter and complete bollocks that this was not going to work. And of course, after they did the first one, they're all quiet about it. He had to take
so quiet. They've literally just deleted it from a website. This annual tournament was played once. It was meant to be 24 teams. It started out with 6, and then we've never heard of it since. And now he seems to be pretending it never happened at all.
Yeah, that's what happens when you give Italians who have no experience of African football the job to design a competition for Africa, to tell Africa what they think. You see, I'm not going to make any bones about this. We are suffering a form of neocolonialism in African football. And I find it really insulting and really disrespectful that this neocolonialism is going on. And some of us who care about African football will not accept it, and we are going to fight it because we have our own customs, our own traditions, our own needs, and we have to address those needs within our own continent.
Look, so much, whenever, the discussion turns to Real Madrid, it's about, look, you can't have a manager that has a structure. It's just vibes. They just need a vibes man. You've got all these egos. There was some footage which actually you can explain after the Super Cup of Mbappe and sort of waving at Xabi Alonso and sort of dismissively what was happening there.
Yeah, okay. So this, I must admit, when I first saw this and the explanation of this, I found it so hard to believe in terms of that can't seriously have just happened, that there was a bit of me thinking, please, there's got to be another explanation. Now, another explanation has been offered up, but it's come a bit late and it feels a little bit like an excuse. So let me explain the scene for you. Barcelona's players are going up to get their medals or about to go up to get their medals, and it looks very much like Alonso is waving the players over to say, we give them a guard of honour. Mbappe is, 15, maybe 20 metres away from him saying, no, sod that, and waving the players off saying, we're not doing that, come over here instead. And what happens is there's a sort of a pause as people kind of look around, and then they go with Mbappe. And Alonso sort of shrugs and gives up and goes in Mbappe's direction as well. And as a kind of a portrait of, wow, who really is in charge here, it's very powerful. Now, the alternative suggestion has been that this was about a kind of a phalanx of photographers and cameramen and so on trying to get the Barcelona image, and that Real Madrid was standing in their way. So it wasn't quite as direct as saying, well, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing what you say, as no, this is the place to stand, which obviously is far less dramatic. But as a portrait, as an image, it's very powerful. Now, and of course, because so much of the discussion in all of this has been about manager authority, players doing what they want, not so much about tactics and so on, although obviously that plays into this, but about culture and about kind of dynamics and people, basically.
Yeah. And so what's the answer then? I mean, is Arbeloa the answer?
Right. Well, no, Arbeloa is not the answer, which isn't to say that things might not go okay. Arbeloa is not the answer because the question is broader than that. It's not just who's on the bench. But the way you phrased it a minute ago was it they just need someone who gives them vibes, who lets them play. And here at heart, I suppose, is the question is that just what they need? And if they did that, would that be enough? Or has football moved in a direction where even if you've got really, really good players and you let someone who says, okay, keep them happy, keep them relatively fit and let them play, is that actually...
Harry Redknapp.
Yeah, get out there and kick the ball about a bit. No wonder in the bloody reserves. But is that enough? And so this is part of the debate here. Now, you look at that Real Madrid squad, and it's nowhere near as good as the squad that won those Champions Leagues. Equally, there's been a shift in the way, and football's much more about press and high tempo and so on now. Now, that's not to say you can't maybe be countercultural and still win. It's only a couple of years since Real Madrid won the Champions League. You look at Real Madrid's history and it's full of these kind of cycles. The manager comes, wants a structure, it doesn't quite work, he goes, someone turns up and goes, hey, here we go, winning again. Now, you look at the, let's not forget Zidane came in as an emergency coach the first time round. Del Bosque came in as an emergency coach the first time. Ancelotti didn't come as an emergency coach, but he did come at a time in which things weren't working. And this is a story, I've told this before, but I think it's worth reminding people because we sometimes forget it. Ancelotti, his second spell at the club, he phones Real Madrid's chief executive while he's at Everton to talk about potential signings. Have you got any off cuts that we could have? And there's a bit of a conversation, and he asked, oh, how's it going, by the way, your search for a manager? And they said, oh, not very well. We can't really get anyone. He said, well, have you forgotten about the guy who won you the 10th European Cup? What? And Ancelotti plants this idea, and they come back to him and go, oh, yeah, all right then. And he wins
Does
two more.
Does that work for all Everton managers? Could David Moyes do it now?
Give it a go, just in case.
Just a more sensible question, I guess, then is Arbeloa the answer, or is a vibes man enough? Is it do the squad have too much power? Are the egos of the squad too powerful to accept a structure tactics guy? In which case, surely they are, as brilliant footballers, at some point would realise we need somebody who can make us be better than this. Or would it take not winning stuff for 2 years to work that out?
Well, I mean, this is the thing, okay? And so much of this on the face of it can be really clear cut, but then, of course, you get all of these nuances. And as you've just said, do they need 2 years of failure for people to go, okay, let's do this? Right, now, this is part of the issue here. When Alonso takes over, in theory, it's at the best possible time because Madrid were disastrous last year. Now, if ever there's a moment in which people look at it and think, actually, you know what? We could do with some of this. And of course, part of the point is that Alonso, there was a column from Jorge Valdano back in October or November time, I think. And the headline, you don't really need to read the rest of it, or the rest of it, as it's Valdano and always is really, really good. But the headline sort of sums it up really nicely. And it says, Xabi Alonso, accused of doing what he was asked to do. And that's essentially the kind of position. So you bring someone in because you want this structure in theory, because you see or you recognise some need for it, but then you don't either have the culture or the people or the authority to follow it through. Now, in all of this, again, it's a bit simplistic to take it to one image, but the image that really sums it up, of course, is Vinicius in the Clasico. Now, so for those who don't, and this is a Clasico that Real Madrid won. This is Alonso's best moment, which turns out to be his worst moment. He takes off Vinicius with, I think, about 15 minutes to go. Vinicius comes off in a half, goes straight down the tunnel, says, right, that's it, I'll leave the team then. Oh, you don't want me? Right, I might as well just leave, shall I? I'll just get out of here, will I? And he walks off. Now, this is in front of 80,000 people and however many millions of people are watching at home. In front of Alonso, no attempt to hide it, a direct challenge. Now, the challenge itself is a problem, obviously. But what's the problem really is what happens next. And what happens next is nothing. No reasserting of the manager's authority. No attempt to deal with the behaviour of the player. There's a public apology from Vinicius in which he names everyone but very pointedly doesn't name the manager. And so at that point, the manager's authority is gone. And so any attempt to reinforce that is, if you've got a manager who's trying to do things that players don't like, at some point you need some higher authority saying, well, tough shit. But no one did.
Right. So it's Florentino Perez's fault.
Well, I mean, in the end, the culture comes down to that. Now, obviously, all of this is nuanced again, because with this structure, with this system, with these ideas, with him as president, they've had phenomenal years. But in this kind of environment, yes. And also there's another thing here, which is, of course, that Florentino was not particularly enamoured with the idea of Xabi Alonso in the first place. There are other people at the club who wanted to bring him in. And actually, this is a recurring theme as well, is that for the most part, Florentino tends not to believe in managers because he is a player's man in terms of what he thinks the driving force of football is. And so you get, again, it comes back to that thing we're saying, on the face of it, it's clear cut, but it's nuanced, which is that in theory, this is what they wanted. But did they want it enough to follow it through with all its consequences, to reinforce it the way it probably needed to be reinforced? And the answer to that, I think, is no.
And are the fans still they love the Galacticos? It's hard not to love Vinicius and Mbappe, right?
Wow. Okay. Well, so here's the thing, right? So yes and no, because of course everybody loves a superstar player, but Vinicius has been booed and whistled a lot this year. Vinicius, the fans' finger at the moment is pointing at the players. Nobody ever asked for Alonso to be sacked. Nobody ever whistled Alonso. They whistled the team. They whistled individual players, and Vinicius in particular. But no one went for Alonso. So this isn't a decision that is backed by, if you like, a kind of a public uprising in feeling against Alonso. This isn't a lot of people saying that manager's shit, get rid of him, bring someone else in. And so now that, I think, makes the club's position even more difficult, because nobody was watching Real Madrid this year. And I think it's worth saying this because it can sound a little bit, if we do this analysis, like we're saying Alonso is entirely blameless and what the hell did they do? No one can have watched Real Madrid this season and said they were any good. They really weren't. And of course a manager carries some of the responsibility for that. But nor was anyone saying, right, there wasn't as I say, there wasn't this upsurge of opinion that wanted the manager sacked. There just wasn't.
Sid, Jude Bellingham has taken to social media, as they say, to react with anger, righteous anger, to suggestions that he was part of the group of players who wanted Alonso out. Do you know, is his fury justified?
Well, I think his fury is justified in terms of feeling like people are pointing at him individually, rather than this being a kind of, if you like, a collective culture breakdown. From the way it was put to me, the relationship between Alonso and Bellingham wasn't bad. But it is true that but Bellingham's quite a difficult piece to fit in, and certainly to fit in with some of the others. And his position has changed, and his frustration, I think, has been clear as well. You know, this is a guy that came in the first season, wasn't expecting it, but was converted into sort of centre forward. You know, a guy running from a high position in midfield, scoring loads of goals. Suddenly, Bellingham's got 20 goals. Oh, this is ace, isn't it? And then he gets moved, and he gets moved a little bit to the left, a little bit behind the forward, a little bit as a central midfielder. And it's certainly true that his fit with Alonso hasn't quite happened. And it is also true, and, you know, I've kind of enjoyed this game a little bit, that Alonso gets sacked, and you've almost got like a countdown clock, or sort of a list of players. Right, who has said goodbye and thanks, mister? And you go, oh, tick, 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 and we get into the second day and 7 players haven't even said anything yet. And one of them is Bellingham, who eventually does. But of course, at that point, everyone's thinking, oh, I better say something. And I quite admire Vinicius, you know. I quite admire Vinicius saying, you know what? No, I'm not going to be such a hypocrite as to do the thing that says, oh, mister, sorry it didn't work out. Thanks, I've learned so much from you. No, you know what? I didn't like him. I'm not saying shit.